Hi guys, I'm Andy, welcome back to Backpacking UK, the YouTube channel that's all about hiking, backpacking and wild camping. Right, today we'll be discussing should you upgrade your backpacking tent. Now I've got two cracking tents here. I've got the MSR Elixir 1 and the MSR Hubba NX. There's a big price difference between the two. This is £270, this is £490, so £220 difference, but there's also a massive weight difference as well. This is considerably heavier than the other, but it doesn't stop there. There's a huge amount of differences between these tents, and we'll run through them today so you can decide should you upgrade your backpacking tent. Now this does apply to lots of other tents as well. To make this a fair comparison, what I've done, I've taken two tents from the same brand and the same person as well. So the MSR Elixir has quite a basic tent bag, it's quite thick, it's quite heavy. The MSR Hubba has got a really lightweight tent bag. It's a fast packing bag that you can compress really well. Now the differences in pack size is apparently only 2 centimeters. This is only 2 centimeters longer. The other dimensions are exactly the same. However, having used these tents, one thing I will say is the MSR Hubba can really be compacted right down. It's really compactable, that tent, whereas the MSR Elixir is quite a solid pack. So onto the pegs. The MSR Elixir has these hook style tent pegs, which I personally hate because I find they can bend quite easily. They're a decent length though and really good to get into hard ground. The tent peg case is quite thick, quite big. Now the MSR Hubba, you've got a really lightweight little tent peg bag, and you've got much lighter but smaller tent pegs. Now again, I don't rate these at all. They're really quite thin, good for hard ground, but rubbish for everything else. So if you are thinking about getting one of these tents, first thing I'd say is upgrade the tent pegs. Now moving on to the tent poles, MSR Elixir, again you've got a heavier tent pole bag. You've also got some heavier tent poles, but there's still 7000 series aluminium, so they're still a really nice set of tent poles. The MSR Hubba has got these beautiful DAC poles. These are really high quality, light and strong tent poles. Again, you've got a lightweight tent pole bag. So both the MSR Elixir and the MSR Hubba are both inner pitch first tents, but what you can see here is quite clearly the cheaper MSR Elixir has way more solid mesh than the MSR Hubba. This is going to be better in summer, this is going to be better in winter. One thing to note with the cheaper MSR Elixir tent, actually comes with a free footprint. Now it's not just about protecting the bathtub floor of the tent. By using this footprint, you can actually pitch this tent outer first. Now the tent poles are quite different. The MSR Hubba, it's got an all-in-one tent pole system. The MSR Elixir uses much more tent pole material and also uses a crossing pole too. So on the cheaper tent, you've got just quite a simple bit of guy rope there, non-adjustable. And then on the more expensive tent, you can properly fine-tune it. Right, so now the tents are pitched. First thing you can see straight away is the cheaper MSR Elixir is bigger than the MSR Hubba. It's actually a whopping 9 centimeters taller, which is a big deal if you like interior space and if you're a bit taller. Lengthways, it's 2 centimeters longer and it's 8 centimeters wider as well. So the cheaper tent is definitely bigger than the more expensive tent. So let's take a look around the cheaper MSR Elixir one first. So materials are very different. Now this is a polyester material as opposed to the MSR Hubba's nylon. It's a much thicker 68D fabric, so it's going to be far more durable. Now one thing with these polyester tents, they are better in the rain. They don't sag as much, but that comes at a weight penalty as well, and that's partly why this tent does weigh more as well. So the floor is a really nice thick 70D fabric with a 3000 hydrostatic head rating, so really waterproof bathtub floor, and the mesh is 20D. So let's have a look around the MSR Hubba NX. Very different fabrics here. So we've got 20D nylon fabric with a hydrostatic head rating of 1200 millimeters. The Elixir is higher at 1500 millimeters. I mean, to be honest, they're both quite low, but it is what it is in this case. Now the floor's a lot thinner, but it still retains a hydrostatic head rating of 3000 millimeters. The inner mesh is also thinner too, 15D fabric as opposed to the Elixir's 20D. So both the cheaper and the more expensive tents both have exactly the same size vestibule, which is 76 centimeters. So let's see what features we've got inside this more expensive tent, and basically not a lot. You've got a couple of little hooks up there and also one pocket. So on the cheaper MSR Elixir, you've got a pocket on either side and two pockets at the top and 4 places to like hang a lantern on top. So much more features on the cheaper tent. So ventilation on the MSR Hubba NX is just one vent on one side, but the cheaper MSR Elixir has one vent on either end, so that will really aid airflow. So let's talk about other tents. So if you're going to be spending a lot more money, I see it, you get one of two things, sometimes both together. You either get a much lighter tent or a much durable tent as well. And like I say, sometimes it can be lighter and more durable as well. If you think about Hilleberg tents, they're not necessarily lighter, but the build quality is top notch, and you can take their tents into all sorts of weather. They're Curlon fabric, which is basically like a nylon fabric, but a super strong nylon fabric, silicone treated on both sides 3 times, so it's highly water resistant. So that's what you're paying for with a Hilleberg tent, is the quality of the materials and the build construction. The lightweight end, that's when you can start going into your ultralight backpacking gear. You can start looking at materials like DCF fabrics, which are incredibly strong fabrics, but are really thin and really light. My advice to you would be, if you're thinking about upgrading your tent, think about what type of wild camping or backpacking you do. Like I've said, when you're looking at the difference between taking a 1 or a 2 person tent, the same applies. Where are you going wild camping? When are you going wild camping? You know, the seasons. Are you going to camp in adverse weather conditions? You know, are you going to be the person that walks a couple of miles and sets up camp? Are you going to be the type of person that walks 15 miles and sets up camp? Are you the type of person that's going to go away for a week in a tent? You know, these are all things that you need to consider when upgrading your tent. Now, for me personally, when I'm looking at tent upgrades and what you can get for what money, I think there's a very quick improvement early on. If you're looking at a really cheap tent, quite often you get fiberglass poles, which I absolutely hate. they're pretty rubbish. But then quite quickly you can afford a tent with aluminium tent poles, a nice nylon fabric, for really not that much money at all. Now, to get a much better tent becomes much harder and costs a lot more money. You're starting to get into like marginal gains territory. So if you're buying a tent that's 50 quid and 100 quid, there's a massive difference, or 100 quid and 200 quid, that's a big difference. But if you start looking at like a £300 tent and £500 tent, there's much less difference there. And again, so just be mindful of that. If you could spend a lot more money for not a huge benefit necessarily. One thing I will say with these MSR tents is they're both absolutely cracking, and I think they're really good value for money, and I'd highly recommend both of these actually. They're really nicely put together. They've been around for ages. I think MSR is actually scared of changing these tents because they're such big sellers, and choosing which one to buy just depends on your budget and what sort of camping that you want to do. So what would I personally do? So big price difference between these two. Now, without a doubt, if I was going cold weather camping or windy camping, I would take this tent. If I was going for a longer backpacking trip, without a shadow of a doubt, I would take this tent. But value for money, hands down, I would say it's got to be the cheaper tent. And to be honest, value for money on all tents tends to be better at the cheaper end of the scale. So I hope you like this tent review. It's a really difficult one. In this particular case, I would say this is much better use all year round than the more expensive Hubba. If I was doing a multi-day trip, without a shadow of a doubt, I would want a lighter weight tent, so that's a winner. But there's a big price difference between the two. Can you justify it? I think at the end of the day, you can only really justify it if you're after a lightweight tent, because at the end of the day, the cheaper tent's more durable. So anyway, hope you like this review. Please check out my other tent reviews. Hope to see you camping soon. Cheers.